Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Walmart. New beauty is in bloom at Walmart, and it's all about springtime radiance. From Drybar, Tula Skincare, and hundreds more available online, Walmart has the premium brands you want and this season's on-trend products for flawless, glossy hair and hydrated skin. Big name beauty brands? Check. The things you love? Check. Find trending spring beauty and all you need to look and feel gorgeous at Walmart, on app and online.
The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rebecca Larson, and I'm very excited to welcome back to the show, Alison Weir. Welcome back, Alison.
Hi, Rebecca. Lovely to be back.
Well, it's been a while since you've been on the show, so I'm very excited to talk to you today about Wolsey.
Yeah.
He is such an interesting character. And I'd like to say character, but obviously he's a historical figure from history. But as a person, he is so intriguing. So I think maybe what I want to start off with here is, first of all, why did you choose him? And second of all, how do you decide between writing historical fiction and nonfiction on people like him?
Well, I was sitting at a launch party dinner when I launched my last but one novel, with my agent and various author friends. And Sarah Griswood, the historian and author, is a good friend. We were tossing ideas around, and she said, how about a book, The Cardinal, a novel of power? Well, I've been discussing another idea with my agent, but I saw his face just light up. And I thought, oh, that sounds such a challenge. But yes, I could see it working. And I thought, oh, hell, because I haven't ever researched Wolsey directly. He's been researched as part of another narrative or another historical work. But I thought, no, this is going to be a challenge. And what a challenge, because while Cromwell has become the sexy figure, let's say, of a Tudor England, and before him, Sir Thomas More, we think of A Man for All Seasons. Wolsey's seen as an old reactionary. He represents the old world order, the Catholic Church that was overthrown in England. And I thought, he's not had the best press. And I thought, it's time for him to have a say. And so that's where I was coming from.
I love it. I love that you sometimes pick these figures from history and you bring them to life with your amazing storytelling. You are such I mean, I don't want to like brown nose too much here, but you are such an amazing storyteller. And I just don't understand how you can shift from historical fiction to nonfiction.
Neither did I when I started, because I remember delivering the first nonfiction after I'd written my first novel or sweated blood over it. And my editor said, you can't write this. Sounds like fiction. And so I had to rein back in, because they are two very different disciplines. So I did one in the morning and one in the afternoon these days. And I make that switch. It's become a way of life, because I've published, goodness me, about 13, 14 historical novels now. So, so I've had a lot of practice. And I am first and foremost, I think, a historian, but I also see myself as a storyteller, whichever way I do it.
Yeah, you are such a prolific writer too. And I'm going to take this opportunity to thank you on behalf of everyone in the world, because I think you have done so much for Tudor history and getting people interested in it. And I don't know if you hear that enough. So thank you.
Sometimes I do, and it's really touching. It makes me feel all that stress is worthwhile.
Yeah,
I really do. Because when you are under pressure, you sometimes think, what's got to give? Mm-hmm. But no, I love doing what I do. And I'm always trying to recapture that feeling of just doing it for the fun of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to a deadline. This is it. This is what I really enjoy.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Thomas Wolsey. And I think let's start at the beginning, because I think the part of his life we do not hear much about is his life before Tudor court. So what did that look like?
Well, that's where I had to do a lot of research. He was the son of an Ipswich is in Suffolk, east of England, and his son of an Ipswich innkeeper who also was a farrier, kept animals, was a butcher as well, dabbled in all sorts of things, and was not a very good innkeeper. Sold food that was out of date and underweight and that, and constantly coming into trouble with the authorities. Wolsey was a very clever boy. Through his mother's family was wealthy, and through them he attracted the attention of a bishop who sort of pulled strings and got him into the local grammar school. And he did very well, and he went to Magdalen College School soon after it had been founded in Oxford, and very quickly transferred to the university at the age of 11. Got his degree at 14, and thereafter stayed at Oxford for many years, because I think he was in search of a powerful patron who could advance him in life. That's what you needed in those days, and he got so far, but the patrons either died or most of them actually died. Yes, including the Archbishop of Canterbury when he got that far in life, and then he'd come to the attention of King Henry VII in the early 16th century. And the king liked him and admired his work. And when the king died in 1509 and Henry VIII, his son, came to the throne, Henry knew that this was a man he could rely on. From then on, the sky was the limit. Wolsey's career was meteoric.
Yeah, it's quite amazing, his rise. And I think one of the things that I read in your book, and being that it's historical fiction, I feel like I have to go research and find out which parts were embellished and what weren't. But when it comes to his relationship with the son of Elizabeth Woodville, can we talk about that?
Lord Dorset, yes, Lord Dorset. He was tutor to Lord Dorset's sons. And this was probably his first taste of the high aristocratic life to which he aspired, because he was invited home by Lord Dorset, who was a very impressed parent, invited home to spend Christmas with them. And, Christmas in a lordly household could be quite magnificent. And Wolsey was obviously quite dazzled. And one imagines that this is where he thought, I could have a lifestyle like this. I want a lifestyle like this. And so it gave him ideas for I think it fueled his ambition.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it did. So he's making this rise through the ranks. At what point does he grab the attention of Henry VII?
Because he works for the Archbishop of Canterbury. And the Archbishop of Canterbury, of course, introduced him to the king, and the king immediately appreciated his talents. He had a good report of him from the Archbishop, and poached him basically after the Archbishop died. He came. I think he served Sir Richard Nanfam. He went to Calais and worked there for a while, and then when another patron died, Sir Richard Nanfam, he came back to England with a letter of recommendation for the king.
That's quite magnificent. So I have to ask too.
He got up in the world. He soared in the world, but very slowly, until, of course, 1509.
Can we go back a little bit and maybe talk about his father and the end of his father's life and maybe what he expected from his son, Thomas?
Well, I think he wanted his son to go into the church. I don't think Wolsey wanted to go into the church, but the whole point was that going into the church for younger sons in particular, or for the sons of poorer men, meant advancement, because you could come from anywhere and enter the church, and if you had the talent, you could rise in it. But again, as I say, you also need patrons once you get to a certain level, and Wolsey, as I say, he found patrons. Eventually, it took many years. He stayed at Oxford for many years, holding various offices as an academic. And then it took him a while to do that. But when his father died, he actually said in his will that Wolsey had to become ordained as a priest within a year, or he wouldn't get the money that had been left to him. So you can see how strongly the father felt about this, that this was the way to preferment for his son. But when Wolsey actually did become ordained priest, probably much against his will.
Yeah. What do you think?
Because he took a pragmatic decision.
Oh, I was going to say, what do you think it was about his personality that made him so likable and wanted people, left people wanting to advance him?
He was a very affable man, very congenial man, quite convivial. We always think of Wolsey in that portrait with his cardinal robes on, cardinal's robes on. He loved going hunting. He loved keeping a good table. He was a lavish host. His feasts were legendary. Of course, this was when he was in power, but he was a man who liked the good things in life, and he was a fixer. He could get things done. And I think people admired that in him. They admired his energy and they admired his charisma. He must have been charismatic.
Yeah, he must have been. He's just such a remarkable figure.
You never get it from the portraits. If you look at the portrait, Google some portraits of Wolsey, you will never get that from that. You have to look in the sources to find the real Wolsey.
Yeah, the portraits just make him look like, a religious man.
They're not very good. They're two-dimensional. And he looks like a rather fat, overblown cleric.
Yes, he does.
Nothing sexy there.
No, definitely not. One of the things you wrote about, too, was that his mother was dying around the same time that Henry VII was, and how tormented he was by what to do. Can we talk more about that?
I've embellished this. Because we
okay.
know, but we know that his affair with Joan Lark began around that time, and we can conjecture it quite authentically, I think. And I've made this the occasion for him to go home for her funeral and meet Joan Lark.
Oh, brilliant!
So I've had to imagine a lot here because we know very little about Joan Lark. We have fragments of information about her. And one has to construct this story and put yourself in their position. Clearly, they were together for at least 10 years. And ask yourself how they would have felt in that position, because once his career went stratospheric under Henry VIII, who I should say was quite a prim man and saw himself as a virtuous king and would not have approved. Joan Lark had to stay hidden, and their children. Think about what happened. They had at least 2 children, and they couldn't bring those children up themselves. And therein lies the tragedy.
Yeah, I feel for him. It's so conflicting. I don't know how else to say it. Obviously he was a man of the cloth who gave in to carnal pleasure. How common was that back then for men of the cloth?
Quite common. The Archbishop of Canterbury himself had a mistress and children. Other bishops did as well. Don't forget, Wolsey probably took holy orders because he saw it as a way to advancement. He wasn't going to get to prominence through the noble route. But he was fortunate to live at a time when the Tudor kings were sort of turning their faces away from the older nobility, whom they regarded as a threat, and turning to new men of ability rather than rank and blood, who could get things done for them. And so Wolsey came on the scene just at the right time.
Yeah. From what we know of Tudor history, he was really Henry VIII's right-hand man, wasn't he?
Yes, but I think he was a lot more than that. I think he regarded Henry, who was 20 years younger, as a son, almost as a son. And Henry, who had been at odds with his own father, I think Wolsey was a father figure, someone he could rely on, someone who would get things done for him, someone he could lean on.
Oh, I like that idea. That's a lovely idea.
That's how I see them. And I think it was quite clear the king had great love for him. And I think he did for Henry. In fact, if you read towards the end of his life when he's out of favour and he keeps thinking the king will give him some crumb of comfort or friendship, it's pitiful to read the original source material that shows how he's longing for some sign, just a crumb, And so I think on Wolsey's side, definitely he loved the king.
Oh, see, I like to hear that. It really does make him more human when you write about him.
That's why I wanted to write about him. I wanted to make him human, not the two-dimensional person we see, this busy mover and shaker who was just ambitious and only cared about himself. I think there's far more to Wolsey than that.
There's so many figures from Tudor history that are that way, aren't there?
Oh, there are, absolutely. And we know of them only as characters on the sidelines, because all the histories, most of the ones I've written, are about the main characters. But look elsewhere and do a bit of side research, and you find a rather different narrative, which has a bearing on the main narrative.
It is so important when doing your research on a
Yeah.
specific topic to broaden, like you said, broaden that knowledge, look around them, look at the people who were surrounding them and what was
Yeah.
going on.
Yes. But sometimes you don't have the scope to do that in a novel. In a history book, there are bit players, supporting cast, and you'll really have to focus on your main character and the people who are closest to them, or
Yeah.
the people who are going to have an influence in their lives.
This is why you're so talented. You just
Oh,
blow
I
my
don't know.
mind.
Oh God! You should be at the meeting with my publishers when we discuss what's going to go, the book's going to be like, and we brainstorm it. But I've already got an idea before that when where I think it's going, and their creative input is very helpful.
Oh, I love it. So, okay, so Wolsey is at the court of Henry VIII now. What kind of relationship would you say he had with Catherine of Aragon?
Well, no, to start with, not very close, because the Queen had her own apartments, and Wolsey was dealing with Henry and on the political side, on the official side. But very soon there became a perception that Wolsey was pro-French. The Queen, of course, was a Spaniard, and when in the early years of her marriage to Henry, she was incredibly influential, and the privy councillors complained that England was being ruled at one remove by Spain, by her father. Wolsey, after Henry fell out with her father, 5 years after the marriage, Wolsey then came into his own. And I think there was a resentment on Catherine's part. He did try to, butter up to her, but it was never a happy relationship, and she didn't like him for his voluptuousness, as she perceived it. That doesn't just mean his sex life; it means his good living, his luxurious lifestyle. She thought he's a churchman; he shouldn't be like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Was it common knowledge that he had this relationship with Joan and had children?
It's hard to tell, but the fact that she was kept so under wraps suggests that the king, Wolsey was, you've got to look at Wolsey in context. He's hated by the older nobility, by the people at court who feel he's a parvenu. He's jumped up. He's usurped their natural role as counsellors to the king. And advisors to the king. He's got there through his own ability. They're jealous of his abilities. They're jealous of his wealth and his status. He's got everything they want. And he's a butcher's son. Hello? Can't have this going on. There's enough scandal. People put about rumours about his private life, that he's fornicating all over the place. So I think that he was aware that he couldn't court any scandal, and that Henry would not have approved of it, because it would have reflected on Henry. Henry's choice of minister reflected on him. So his minister had to be virtuous. And so therefore, I think Wolsey trod a tightrope. And until he gets to a scene in the novel, I don't know whether you read that far, where Henry drops in unexpectedly in the house that he's assigned to Wolsey, and hears a baby cry. And wonders why there's a baby in a cleric's household. I won't go on any more about that.
Yes, I did. I loved that scene. I did read that scene, and I loved the way that it played out. So,
did you get to the later scene, the really tragic one, in the wake of the marrying off of Elizabeth Blount, the king's mistress?
I did not. Oh, gosh.
Well. Yeah, Henry had a mistress in the from about 1514 to 1520, and she bore him his only acknowledged bastard, Henry Fitzroy. And in the wake of that, it was in 1519, Henry delegated everything to Wolsey. So Wolsey found himself, apart from running the country, he was actually meant to find a husband for Elizabeth Blount, so she would be respectably married off. And he did. He got her a young baron, and there was an outcry. The wages of sin is a good marriage. And so I think that then this is at this point that Henry makes it clear that he knows what's happening in Wolsey's life, and he's not happy about it.
Oh, it's
I'm not going to say
fascinating.
anymore.
Yeah, you have to read the book. You definitely have to read
Yeah,
the
absolutely. Have to read the book. Yeah.
book.
But it coincides with the date of Joan's marriage.
Oh, interesting.
This is what I was thinking, that she was married soon after that. And that's what gave me my storyline.
Oh my gosh,
But
I
I'm not
love
going to say what happened between her and Wolsey.
it. We'll save that.
Oh, I am going to. I'm going to give you another teaser because she and her new husband had a house at Thames Ditton, about a mile from Hampton Court, where
Ooh,
Wolsey was in residence.
that's convenient, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is.
Okay, so now I'm really curious about what kind of relationship Wolsey had with Thomas More, because I feel like we see Thomas More as such a close ally of King Henry VIII. Did they get along?
I would say Wolsey was a closer ally. More didn't want to come to court. More was not worldly. He wanted to be a scholar, and that was his world. But he was also a lawyer, and he was a good diplomat. And Henry admired him. He was friends with him, and he enticed him to come to court. And More said, "You can't believe how reluctant I am," but he did. He went to court. He didn't seek the wealth and power that Wolsey had, although he had a very comfortable lifestyle, but he was never comfortable with it. And of course, the spanner was thrown in the works because when Henry wanted to divorce Catherine of Aragon, and so was launched the king's great matter. And More felt he couldn't support the king in this, or in later declaring himself head of the Church of England. Wolsey was doing his best to obtain the annulment for Henry. Now, he didn't live long enough to find out about Henry breaking with Rome. But I think that More saw Wolsey as quite a worldly man, and not he didn't. I don't think he liked his political pragmatism, and I think that Wolsey was a bit wary of More because he thought he probably realised how More saw him.
Why do you think it is in, let's say, a TV series like The Tudors? Why do you think it is that they make More this friendly buddy of Henry VIII? Why do you think they make him that versus showing Wolsey as more of that character? What is it about More as a person that they want to do that?
Because we know a lot about More's private life. He was a great family man, and he had his daughters educated the same way as his sons, which is quite, advanced for the time. King and Queen themselves, Henry and Catherine, were interested to do the same for their daughter, the Princess Mary. And More was friends with Henry, and we see this. We read about them going up on the leads at Greenwich Palace to look at the stars together. Yeah. And Henry may have been a guest at More's house at Chelsea. We see that in the film A Man for All Seasons. Mm-hmm. But he obviously had a similar relationship with Wolsey, but the emphasis is always on Wolsey's political role in his life. They went hunting together. Sometimes they didn't see each other for quite long periods. Wolsey would work from his own residence, and he'd go to court on a Sunday sometimes, and they'd catch up with the king. But they kept in touch by letter regularly, and they were friends. There's no doubt about it.
I love that you're showing like the softer side of Wolsey, the side, like you said, that we don't often see.
There was a harder side to Wolsey, but I think the softer side comes across. I mean, the businessman is prominent in Wolsey. The churchman to a much lesser degree. In the States, the jacket, I don't know if you've seen the jacket.
I haven't.
It shows him, this man in the cardinal's robes, walking down the side aisle in a cathedral. And when they first sent it to me, they've done a lot on the colour on it, and it looks lovely now. When they first sent it to me, I thought the last place I associate Wolsey with is a cathedral. He was Archbishop of York because he never actually went to York Minster, and you don't associate. And he was Archbishop, and he was Bishop of Winchester. I don't think he ever went there either. So I don't associate him with that. But I do think there's a kinder side to him. And you see it in he's always striving to do what Henry wants. Mm-hmm. Because when he couldn't do what Henry wanted, despite his best efforts, That's when things went awry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now we have to talk about Anne Boleyn because obviously
The
that was
elephant in the room.
it really is. How did Wolsey feel about her when she came into the picture?
Well, she came into the picture not through Henry, because he had lots of young gentlemen, some of the sons of the nobility, some of them in his household, and they were there in time-honoured fashion to learn about about the skills of knighthood and how to be courtiers and how to minister estates. It was an apprenticeship for public life. And one of them was Henry Percy, the heir to the Earl of Northumberland, a great earldom. And this young man fell in love with Anne Boleyn when she was one of the Queen's maids of honour. This is 1523. And they pre-contracted themselves to each other, which is quite serious because, for one thing, heirs to the nobility weren't allowed to get married without the King's permission, he's having approved their choice of bride. And secondly, a pre-contract was as binding as a marriage, could only be loosed by an ecclesiastical court. And so Wolsey got wind of this. It had been agreed that it had been arranged that Percy was actually going to marry the daughter of the Earl of Shrewsbury, which was a fitting match on a level playing field. Yeah. When it came to his knowledge that Percy was going to marry Anne Boleyn, the king was offended because his prerogative had been flouted, and Wolsey broke it and called Anne Boleyn that foolish girl yonder in the court. And she was sent home to Hever Castle, her family home. And George Cavendish, Wolsey's gentleman usher, who records this in his Life of Wolsey, wrote, "She smoked." And she hated Wolsey thereafter. Now, I don't think it's just because of this, because the king's eye didn't light on her for another 2 years. And I think she hated the fact that this son of a butcher, who, she is the granddaughter of the Duke of Norfolk, and her father's the Earl of Wiltshire. And I think she really resented the way he looked down on her. But as soon as he knew that the king wanted to marry her, he begged the king on his knees not to marry her, not to go ahead with this divorce for hours, he said later. And she probably knew about this and was offended yet again. So she was determined she was going to topple him. And she embarked on this campaign of undermining him. And she was really a virulent enemy. In the end, he started to call her the Night Crow. How he saw her. So in the blurb in this, I've said this is a tale of two women, one who loved him and one who loathed him.
Oh, that is so true, isn't it?
It is, absolutely, yeah. She never left off trying to persuade the king to move against him. She did her best to topple him, and she succeeded in the end.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, the story is so tragic, and we've recently now in the U.S. had the release of the new season of Wolf Hall. So yeah, so of course, isn't it? Oh, it's so wonderful,
it's amazing.
And I'm just watching it week by week. I haven't paid for the subscription to be able to binge watch it all, but it's
just come out on DVD here. But I went to the premiere here, and it was amazing. Cast were on the stage, and musicians playing the music, and it was a nice party as well. It was fantastic.
I really love Mark Rylance as Cromwell. It's that sympathetic figure.
He is. I don't quite see Cromwell like that, but I think that he's using the Cromwell in the book, and it's fiction.
Yes,
and it's a brilliant portrayal, and he's done it. He's done it so well. I've met him. He's an absolutely charming man, a really nice man, and he's so brilliant in the role. And I think in this one, both of them, he and Damien Lewis, both excel themselves in it. Yeah. So you're in for a treat with the rest of it, because I've got the DVD.
I love it. I love in that show how they show the relationship between Cromwell and Wolsey. And I want to talk about that, about Wolsey's relationship with Cromwell. What can you tell us about their relationship?
It's pretty much as it's portrayed. Cromwell did try to do his best for Wolsey after Wolsey fell from favour, when there had been a hearing, a trial in the Great Hall of the Blackfriars in London in June 1529, and the Pope had sent a Cardinal as legate, and he tried the case with Wolsey. What Wolsey didn't know, Wolsey was praying, sweating on the line that the Cardinal would agree to grant the annulment that Henry wanted. At the end of it, the Cardinal stood up and said the case was so complex he was referring it back to Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the end for Wolsey. And Cromwell did his best to try and ameliorate, the reaction to this, because once people got the idea that Wolsey had fallen from favour, the walls were ready to pounce and throw all his enemies, and there were many of them, mostly out of jealousy, were ready to, bring him down as much as they could. They tried to prefer charges of treason, praemunire, and all kinds of, offences were alleged against him. And the poor man had done nothing but gone against his better judgment in trying to secure this annulment, because he knew, it's quite clear he knew, that Henry's marriage to Catherine was valid despite the king's arguments.
Mm.
And so he went against himself for Henry. And so, so Cromwell, yes, did do his best. He tried to influence Parliament in Wolsey's favour. And but he there was only limited amount he could do, but he was very fond of him, and he grieved very much for him.
Yeah, it's such a sad story. I wonder too, did Wolsey have any idea of any type of danger he was in for not giving Henry what he needed?
Yes, all the way through. I think he was right from the start. He was utterly dismayed when Henry first opened the matter to him and said what he wanted. He wanted an annulment, and he was very worried. He was thinking of all the ramifications of it. You're talking about a period when it's only 10 years since Martin Luther has nailed his theses to the church door in Wittenberg and literally launched the Protestant religion. And that's seen as heresy, and it's permeating Europe. So anything that destabilizes the church is going to be a worry to conservatives. And Wolsey saw that the king questioning a papal dispensation and the Pope's right to have granted it is a bit cataclysmic. And Catherine saw this as well. Catherine's advisors saw this. The Pope wanted to please Henry, but Rome had just been sacked by mercenary troops of Catherine's nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor. And the Pope was the Emperor's prisoner. Is he going to have his aunt annulled? No, he's not. And even after he was freed, he was terrified of the Emperor for the rest of his life. And so Henry was never going to get that annulment. And after 7 years, the Pope declared the marriage lawful. And by then, Henry broke with Rome, married Anne Boleyn. So, it didn't end well for anyone, particularly Anne Boleyn.
Yeah, particularly. Is there any indication of Wolsey wanting to protect Joan and his children during this time?
No, I think she's more concerned about him. They're not together at this time, but they are in touch. I'm not going to say any more.
Okay.
They are in touch, yes, because they don't want to be parted.
Okay, so then I guess we're to the point now where we're looking at the last few months maybe of Wolsey's life.
Yes.
What did that look like for him?
Increasingly dismal, although in another way, triumphant on a personal level, because his fall was in the autumn of 1529, and then he was ordered to go north to his diocese in Yorkshire. He wasn't arrested or anything, the king had, protected him from what his enemies were doing, but he wouldn't see him. And he was ordered, it was virtually an exile, he was ordered to go north to Yorkshire, but and to look after his flock, which he had never done. And on the way, he had this sort of epiphany where he decided he was going to make a success of being Archbishop of York. And on the way north, he had this very long journey north where he would baptize hundreds of children and bless people. And then he would intervene in disputes and try to settle them. He did everything he should have done as a good shepherd to his flock. And his reputation grew, and he became much loved in the north. And in that short space of time, he got up to Cawood Castle, which was one of his houses as Archbishop of York, and he was going to York for his ordination. He never got there. And that would be to give away the end of the book. He never went to York Minster.
Okay, can we be clear that he did not commit suicide?
No, he did not. I just wondered about that. I had to go and lie down when I saw that in the Tudors.
I know.
Never seen this in my historical source.
Like sometimes you wonder, like, okay, did you have to go that far? Like, what made them decide?
Why?
Yeah,
Why? I suppose they think that modern filmmakers think, it's obviously dramatic, film, but but that he was in such a state, he realized he was in such danger and he was in such disgrace and he could never recover things. So he killed himself. They don't take account of the fact that suicide in Tudor times would have been regarded as a huge sin. In fact, it was for many, many centuries afterwards, because you're going to cut yourself off from God. And if you decide to commit suicide, you literally know you're not going to heaven, and that's you're consigned to hell.
Yeah,
and you can't come back from that. So that's where Romeo and Juliet was so powerful for Elizabethan audiences. So it's very unlikely. Well, he didn't. We know he didn't commit suicide. We know he died of we don't know what the illness was, but it came on pretty quickly. He was pretty active and it came on pretty quickly, and one just wonders.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
I have so many things I want to say, but I want to save it. Save it for the book. Well, I feel like I could talk to you for hours about the Tudors, but
we could. I could too.
I do.
My favorite occupations, talking about history.
Yes, exactly. I want to know if you could leave the audience with one thing about Wolsey that maybe we didn't discuss today. What would you want to leave them with?
This was a passionate man.
Oh, I love it. Just simple.
Thank you.
Well, Alison, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your knowledge on Wolsey with us. Let everybody know when your book is coming out.
It's in May. I can't remember the exact date. I think it's come out first in the States and then here. It's on my website anyway, alisonweir.org.uk.
Wonderful.
It's on the front page, homepage of the website. Yeah.
So it's coming out very soon. I highly recommend.
I know. I'm so excited about it. I really am.
I think all of your books are wonderful, but I really enjoyed what I was able to read of this one. You are just...
Thank you so much.
You're amazing.
I've written another one now. A long time ago. Nice to have chatted to you. Lovely to see you.
Thank you, Alison.
Thank you.
And that concludes another episode of the Tudors Dynasty podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you love the show and would like to show your support, consider becoming a patron over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Tudors Dynasty. Over there, you'll get commercial-free episodes, early access, and some patron-exclusive content as well. If you would prefer to show your support in another way, head on over to my website, tudorsdynasty.com, and click on the shop to see some of the new merchandise that I have available. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.